my dears, how's it going? What's new in your lives? What's bringing you joy today? Let me know in the comments. I'm in a weird headspace today, but anyway, welcome to the first video that is getting graded by my independent study / thesis advisor. So no pressure or anything. Also, hi, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the cognitive science of performance, arts as therapy, and the importance of inclusion. I'm excited about it. I hope that you are too. I feel like I was made, as a human, to make this video. I'm a psychology and a theater major, and I found that people who teach the arts hate how logical that I am, and then people who teach the sciences hate how creative I am. And you may be thinking, well, Sydney, you have no proof of that. They've never said that to your face. But I've had several people describe me as an artist with the mind of a scientist, also known as autistic. But that gives me a very unique perspective in both fields that I happen to sit equally in. And so when I discovered that the cognitive science of performance is an actual field, I got really excited because I was like, oh my God, they made this solely for me. This is my time to shine. But before we get into critiquing both of the fields we're going to talk about today, hi, my name is Sydney. My pronouns are they, them. I'm doing a master's level undergrad thesis because Lord help me, I never want to go to school again, so I'm just going to do a good job on this one. It's about disability theater and inclusive education, culminating in the world's first all neurodivergent cast and crew production of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. You can learn about it up here. And yes, I will mention it in every single video because the point of doing it is to make a point. But anyway, audio description, I'm a white person in the early 20s with light brown curly shoulder length hair. I'm wearing a cream dress with lemons on it. It's long sleeve, and I'm sitting in front of a slightly chaotic bookshelf. I'm glad to have you here. You're welcome to like, comment, subscribe, all of those things, but also absolutely no pressure. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for learning with me today. And maybe 2 years into this, I'm actually getting an intro. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? Anyway, so yes, the point of this video, let's start by talking about the fields of the arts and the sciences. People are convinced that these two things are opposing and they don't overlap at all. And I hate that a lot. And the books that I read really tried to hammer in the idea of science is very clinical and all data must be repeatable with no outside influences and it doesn't impact the real world really at all. And yet it's taken so seriously while art revels in complexity and actually reflects real life and it's not taken seriously. And the two sides of the academic spectrum never talk to each other and they hate each other. And maybe I go to a liberal arts college and that's why, but I don't experience that to be the case at all. I know that we joke about it a lot, but they overlap very much. Yes, the two fields have differing ways of looking at the world on some level, but there's more nuance in science than we think, and there's more clinical classism in the arts than we think. So if everybody could simply just shut up and listen to each other, not continue to shove the idea that science is opposite to art down my throat, that would be lovely. The reason that every book I read mentioned this arguably non-existent dichotomy is that the combined field of cognition and performance is in a very unique and new position where everything that has been known on the science side and everything that has been known on the art side has been known on both sides for a very, very, very long time. And just now, very recently, people are starting to connect the dots between old research from the 40s and stuff written by Stanislavski. I went into this expecting to see new research I'd never seen before, but instead it felt more like somebody was taking the basics of my psych classes and the basics of my theater history classes and then just smooshing them together, which I guess to people who don't aggressively study both of those fields at the exact same time is revolutionary and different, hence why I'm still making this video to teach you guys about it, but it was underwhelming. I was really excited about it and I was kind of let down. This stuff is really cool and I'm excited to tell you about it and teach you about it, but it's that time that science was did you know that autistic people can feel fear? Check out this new study that proves it. And the community went, that's not new. But this time, instead of the entire autistic community on Instagram being mildly annoyed, it's just me alone in my room being mildly annoyed, so now you get to join me. So let's begin with a discussion of performance from an evolutionary perspective. Anthropologists have both discovered and theorized that the basis of all human cultures has been, on some level, teaching, learning, and repeating an activity together. Most species engage in some sort of play. This is how they refine their physical and mental skills in situations with low consequences. And in humans, we've seen how that has sharpened our ability to recognize, repeat, and refine patterns, as well as connect groups to one another through emotional contagion, which is laughing and singing and feeling with each other, which has helped people to share skill sets that help with survival. So even at the very, very beginning of humanity, some sort of performance, though they definitely didn't look at it that way, was taking place because it just aided survival and evolution. And the things that I read were very specific about how unique humans are as animals and how we don't see this happening with any other species. I have a feeling that in reality that's just plainly not the case because researchers tend to be humans are the best things ever and vaguely mention other species without realizing that we analyze the socialization of other species through an innately human lens, so they could be doing this exact same things that we do, it just looks differently and we don't know how to interpret it. So maybe we should stop looking at humans as a superior species because we are not. But anyway, when it comes to the science aspects of this, even when somebody is in an audience looking at a performance, it still processes in our brain very similar to way back in the ancient human times. That's the that's the official scientific term for that, when we were physically involved in the performance. Because basically we have these things and they're called mirror neurons, and they respond equally when we perform an action and when we watch somebody else perform that same action. So like, if I were to watch a video of a person throwing a ball, the mirror neurons in my brain would process that the same way as if I were throwing the ball. And the thing is, our bodies also generally know that certain motions or physicalities are directly associated with certain feelings and emotions. So if somebody were physically acting really angry on stage, or they were like going like this or something like that, our brains will mirror that physicalized emotion. Or if they're crying because they're sad, exact same thing. And so when you combine that with the emotional context of the show, in theory you would know why they're sad or angry or whatever, because you're emotionally invested in the story. You are learning how to understand and interpret the emotions of other people, which in our culture is a survival mechanism, because if you can understand other people, you can communicate better, and then you get brought along with the group, and then you don't get singled out and die. So basically you're learning survival skills and connecting with your community through performance like they did way long ago. So that's like scientifically why it exists. And I feel like this section of the video is just going to be me explaining to you why the arts are important using scientific proof, as if y'all didn't already know the arts are important, but I still think it's cool, and I did way too much research on this to turn back now. So here we are. Another cool thing about theater is that it typically puts us into a state of flow. And flow is like, it's kind of like hyper-focus light edition, if that makes sense. It's a mental state where you become fully invested in a feeling of energized focus and like fully involved, and you're enjoying the process of the activity, and you get completely absorbed in what you're doing, so time passes differently because of that flow. But you can snap in and out of it fairly semi-easily, kind of like when you get on a roll writing a paper but you stop to eat a snack, not like when you get so focused on something specific that you forget to eat or drink or pee for 2 days. Like, that's hyper-focus. Those are two very different things. But yes, flow is good for your brain. It's a good way for the mind to kind of focus on something and reset a bit and process things. And you're also more likely to be connected with the thing that you're doing because of how focused you are on that thing, so you can also learn more from it. There's also an interesting phenomenon that happens most frequently when we're experiencing performance or involved in it, and it's called conceptual integration or conceptual blending. And that describes the cognitive flexibility of being able to hold several different ideas in our brains at the same time. For example, you can understand that the play that you're watching is fake, but that the story might be based on a real story, and you know that that one actor, you know them because you follow them on Instagram, but you know that they're a character right now, but you also know a piece of them is still shining through, and you notice that one actor over there broke character when the chair fell on his foot, and you're noticing that there's audience members next to you, and you are looking at the things in the auditorium, but you're still listening to the story, and you're focusing on how the song sounds nice, but you're embedded in the story. Or even on like a smaller scale, if somebody made a joke referring to me as a Disney princess and I began to act like one all of a sudden, you know that I'm pretending, and you know when I stop pretending, and you can easily switch your understanding of me engaging in play and just existing, if that makes any sense. That skill takes a lot of higher cognition, and we don't even really think twice about it. Like, the example of my book specifically talked about a bunch of studies that revolved around a 2-year-old who was playing house with her friends, and how they switched between play acting and giggling at their own story and planning the story and acting and then switching to a different character, and they were able to hold all of this stuff in their brains at once and understand the dichotomy between real and fake, which is a very clear example of conceptual integration or conceptual blending. Super interesting. But it is important to note that while our brains are able to hold all of these things in it at the same time and understand generally what is real and what is not real, the dichotomy between the two does not really exist. It's always a sliding scale, and our brains always process somewhere vaguely in the middle-ish. So basically, what I'm saying is that if you heard me saying the previous paragraph of text and you were like, oh, so that means that movies with bad representation don't really matter because we know that they're fake, scientifically, and also just like, as you can see by looking at the world, no, we may know that they're fake, but our brains still are going to make automatic connections between things and process them as at least partially real, and therefore offensive things in performance are still bad. So don't do them. But now while we're talking about dichotomies that don't exist, because apparently that's what this video is about at this point, this doesn't really majorly pertain to what we're talking about, but it did come up in my textbook and it meant a lot to me, so I'm gonna share it. You know how like theater teachers are always saying that you should just stop using your mind and just move, because that always made my brain go, I can't just stop using my brain and move, I need my brain to move, and this is impossible. And I felt like I was stupid and a bad actor because I couldn't do that. But in one of the books that I read for this video, it specifically talked about how theater practitioners in history have taught theater as if there is an inherent split between the body and the mind, particularly theater practitioners that go all the way to the extremes of physical theater. And how not only is that just factually incorrect because the body and mind are always intertwined, but also from a pedagogical or teaching perspective, that's an ineffective way to teach things because we are aware of how intertwined the two are, and you need to teach with that intertwining understanding. And it also talked about how some people need to put more effort into the cognition of their movement depending on their skills with proprioception, which is something that autistic people are typically pretty bad at, which we've talked about before. So, anyway, that brought me joy learning from a scientific perspective that I am in fact not wrong or broken, and how it's just outdated and yet frighteningly widespread teaching methods that are wrong and broken really meant a lot to me, even though I know the system is screwed, but this specific thing has always bugged me, and helped me to let go of some pain that it always felt weird in my soul. So should I be unpacking trauma as part of my thesis? No, that's not what theses are for, and it makes me rather frustrated that I need to do that. But you know what? We'll take what we can get. But back to the main point, performance and cognition. Yes, so as we mentioned earlier, watching performance helps us to learn how to read the emotions of others. And there is this, I guess you could call it a theory? Term? I don't know. Aristotle wrote a thing called the Poetics way back when in ancient Greece, and it was a criticism of theater. He was a snob. And in his text, he talked about how going to see tragedies made people feel all of the emotions in the show, and that therefore purged themselves of those negative emotions in some sort of catharsis. And scientifically, he's completely right on that. We attend theater to feel more, even if it doesn't make us feel better. We go to have our emotional life acknowledged and patterned, managed into coherent storylines, and exposed in all of its tumult. Or its banality. There's a 2021 study that is literally titled "Attending Live Theater Improves Empathy, Changes Attitudes, and Leads to Pro-Social Behavior." I will link that in the description if you are interested. It's basically all the things we already talked about today. And also, if you think back to our discussion of mirror neurons from earlier and how we reflect emotions and process them, he literally scientifically explained how theater works, which is wild to me. But that leads us into the discussion of performance and arts as therapy. We know that theater can illuminate and stimulate mental and emotional activity. It can force us to identify and increase our sensitivity to others. It can deepen our awareness of behavioral patterns in a way that might spur change, and it can lead us into richer understandings of ourselves and our worldly relationships. And I think that honestly everybody at this point is on some level aware that art is either therapeutic or is therapy, whether you directly plan it to be therapy or not. You sing sad songs in the car, you watch movies to get out your emotions, you doodle to help you cope in a painful, boring class. We've seen a rise of adult coloring books and fancy paint by numbers, all of that kind of stuff. I, for one, compose things to reflect on life. Even writing, journaling every day, that is therapeutic on some level, and that is technically creating art. But what's interesting in the realm of inclusion is that given what we know about art and performance as therapy, and specifically the impact of performance on empathy and understanding emotions and social skills, theater as a form of therapy is usually just shoved in the direction of autistic people. And if you do research into theater for autistic people or autistic actors, you will find article after article after article about how using acting and performance teaches autistic children empathy. And we're gonna go off script for a second. Somebody sent me a TikTok this morning, basically about how a lot of autistic kids have been directly told to do theater as therapy, but also a lot of undiagnosed ones just are drawn to it because it's an activity and it's a popular thing that people like. And so because of doing that, because it improves our understanding of acting and emotions and masking and all of that stuff, it's making it harder for theater kids to get diagnosed with autism or even realize that we're autistic, because we have the skills to make us look normal because we learned that by learning how to act in theater education. So it's a double-edged sword. It's still important, but it's a double-edged sword, which I think is interesting to talk about. But anyway, so fine, great, cool, awesome. I love that we're using performance and theater to be therapy. I'm all for therapy, but as we talked about before, it is still controversial to consider these productions as art instead of as social projects. People look at art made by disabled people and automatically assume that it's not legitimate art. It's for therapeutic purposes or just to keep people in a group home occupied. And so when we create theaters for people like us, for example, National Disability Theater, people assume that it is a therapeutic thing or it's not legitimate professional quality art. And yet at the same time we'll go, well, there's theaters for people like you, and then don't hire us in the mainstream at all. And, enter the discussion of the disability arts ghetto that we had a month or so ago. You can watch that up here. Now, here's where the inclusion situation comes into the mix. We have learned that cognitively, theater is the site where we gather collectively to explore what it is to be human. We have the breadth, depth, and diversity of experience rather than a monoculture or just a segment of society talking to itself. We literally use theater and performance and arts in general to connect to each other and understand each other and just generally humanity better and understand ourselves better. So why shouldn't disabled people get to be a part of the mainstream with everybody else, considering we make 20% of the population? I don't know at this point. But then also, as we've talked about before, we're already in the arts, specifically in the autism category. As I mentioned before, we're not getting diagnosed. We're just there. So many autistic people don't know they're autistic. They're seen as quirky artists, and we're accepted into the arts field without issue. So when it comes to inclusion, aka adding disabled people in as the system lies, we're already sort of kind of doing that without acknowledging that we're kind of doing that, and so we're not putting in the effort to really do it. But then at the same time, we need to integrate the system, which is changing the system to be equally inclusive to the needs of everybody. Because as we've talked about before, disabled narratives are everywhere. They're unavoidable. And I would go on further explaining all the reasons why inclusion is important, but I think at this point, let's be honest, we all know that, right? I don't think I need to continue to argue that piece. Most people who want to make inclusion happen, and they just don't know how. And I think that people who don't want inclusion to happen, cognitive scientific explanations of why inclusion is good is not going to change their mind. So yeah, but anyway, inclusion is not working because it's just throwing people into a screwed up system. Integration is what we really need. The thing is, people are afraid to or unsure how to change things as they are now. And that is why I'm working on this thesis. I'm going to create my own accessible theater classroom with my show and figure out what works and what doesn't work, teach you all about what makes a difference for me as a multiple minority student in the classroom, and hopefully help you to feel empowered to change your classroom if you are a teacher, or send these resources to somebody you know who might need them for their teaching or anything else. I've been told before that I should not be doing this for free, and I should just make money as a consultant instead, but I ethically feel weird about that, so I'm going to make these resources free so they're easily shareable. But if you do want to support me at all, I do have a linked buy me a smoothie link in the description if you wanted, but also no pressure. And stay tuned, because next week we're going to be talking about what discrimination and accidental microaggressions look like and how to implement basic trauma-informed practices into your classroom or life in general. This series is obviously vaguely theater education themed, but it also applies to literally any leadership position at all. So I hope that it's helpful for those of you who need it. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Remember, it's never too late to start over, and I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.